Welcome to the Adventure Mechanics side quest, and it's just me, Chandler, today. So I've been getting back into tabletop game design to step away from my quote-unquote 3-month project of Cartogrator. As I've gotten back into meeting people in person again and getting those physical cues on feedback, I've realized that I haven't had that sort of feedback when testing Cartogrator. All the feedback I've had so far has been remote, and worse yet, without any way of getting the physical cues because not everybody has a webcam. This made me stop and think about what I'm looking for in terms of feedback and, possibly more importantly, how I can give better and more clear feedback on games I am playtesting for others. Today I'm going to talk about how to give feedback using various methods that I've come to ask while getting it. If you've listened to my previous side quest where I talked about trying to get feedback on my games, you'll know that I find it important. From the other perspective, however, why would you want to playtest a game before it's done? It can be a buggy mess filled with placeholder artwork and misplaced or mistimed sound effects or musical cues, or no music whatsoever. And depending on the game you're playtesting, it might not even be fun at all. So why even bother playtesting other developers' games? Well, it's about giving back to the community. If you playtest those games, it shows that you are part of the community and, more importantly, someone who is willing to help others out. This pays out when you go to get playtesters for your game in the future. You also get an opportunity to play some early versions of potentially fun and engaging games. And when a game is in such an early state, you can see real progress on it and potentially make a big difference in what the final project could be. Making sure you have playtesters for your game and potentially seeing the next big one should be reason enough to help out your fellow developer. It's not even a time-intensive task either. It does come with some challenges, so let's talk about those next. First of all, let's just take a second to acknowledge that giving feedback in any form is hard. Sometimes you just don't know what to say, so you give empty praise or vague and hand-wavy, well, if I was doing this sort of fantasies. I know because I find myself giving the same sort of feedback when a person I'm playtesting for doesn't have anything specific that they want me to examine. Learning to be comfortable with just reporting your experience with the game goes a long way to helping the developer. These can be what you felt while playing the game, points of friction you had, areas you wish there was more of, and areas that may make you happy. Sometimes you're coming in as a playtester late in development, and that's really all the developer's looking for. Other times, this feedback gives the developer an opportunity to ask some probing questions. Either way, you're giving more honest and blunt feedback to that developer. That's not to say that your feedback should be just shitting on their design, though. They are human, after all. If feedback is just saying something to the effect of, well, I don't like this type of game, well, then it's not even really worth mentioning. If the genre isn't your cup of tea, but there was something that you really liked in it, well, then say it. Games are supposed to be fun and engaging, and your efforts in playtesting the game will help the developer get those fun and engaging elements in their design. Keep in mind that the reason you're playing is to highlight those spots where they're really good and maybe not so good, not just to tear down that person. Keep that much in mind at all times when giving feedback, even in everyday situations. Keep that stuff in mind. We are all humans. Let's be nice to each other. A lot of times, a developer will be upfront and start with a few prompts. They're looking for something more specific when you play the game and may start the playtest session with some more probing questions. Like, does this feel right? How does this look? Did you have difficulty with this part? If the developer's asking you questions like these, it means you should start your feedback with those areas first. They may already know the other parts where you ran into issues, so fixating on them and ignoring the questions they asked is only wasting their time and yours. Only once you've gone over the areas that they wanted to focus on and they seem satisfied with your feedback, or even possibly smoke is coming out of their ears because you gave way too much, you may then start to broaden your perspective a bit and ask about the other areas that you either had trouble with or you wanted to see improved. It's important to keep in mind that when playtesting games this way, that they are looking for you to examine that specific area. The more granular you can get in those areas they're looking for feedback, the more you can potentially help make their game better. If, on the other hand, you're just sat down in front of their demo, alpha, or whatever they're calling their prototype, and they ask you to play their game, you're on your own in terms of what to look at. My advice is to play the game as you normally would for a given genre. If you're the type of player in a first-person shooter that runs around like a chicken without a head, play like that. If you're the person in an RPG who goes through the entire map, searching every nook and cranny for that last piece of gold or loot, play like that. Hopefully you're not going to be the person sitting there to do a bug hunt, though, and more of a person to give a more holistic view of the game. Trust me, in the course of playtesting the game as normal, you'll find bugs. Every game has bugs. If the developer is nearby, mention it to them, but don't fixate on that bug. If you're not sure about anything, well, don't be afraid to ask about it. These are good cues for the developer to pay attention to in terms of where the player can and will get stuck in their game. And while doing this, it may not feel natural to talk about the game so much while you're playing it, but it really does help. If the dev is open to it, even probe a little bit further and ask what their motivation or design process was while they were designing the game. It's a good way to get their perspective on game design while you're testing their game. Not all developers are going to be into that while you play, though. If they're only giving you short, curt responses or non-answers, that's fine. Not everyone wants to be open about their process. In my view, though, game development and design is an open process and should be shared. But I'm not every developer. Other developers like to keep their games close to their vest. It's good to keep that in mind while playtesting or talking with developers in general. One other part to consider while playtesting is if you're the only one giving feedback or if you're part of a group test. If you're the only playtester in the room, being more complete with your feedback is hugely important. Any area that you miss in terms of talking about is an area that the developer will likely assume to be fine or good. If these areas of the game were fine, then fine, don't bring them up. Or at least not in the same depth as the areas that bothered you. For those areas that really bothered you or that you really loved in their game, absolutely mention them. Focusing on those areas is going to be one of the key takeaways from any playtest session. If you're part of a group, however, don't be part of a dog pile and mention other things that have already been brought up. This not only makes it sound worse, but it'll also make the developer think that the area mentioned is the absolute worst area in the game and it needs immediate attention. This is not only counterproductive, but it might actually be taking away from the other areas in the game that probably need more help. If it really bothered you, sure, fine, bring it up. Just don't spend a long time critiquing it if somebody's already has done so, unless you think your perspective is sufficiently different from theirs. You're not going to get to all the feedback you want to if you're repeating everything else somebody else has already said. So far, I've only framed it in terms of giving feedback using your experiences and reporting them. I'm intentionally doing this. This may be an unpopular opinion, but this is going to be the most valuable feedback you can give. As a designer, I have a nasty habit of suggesting things that I personally would find most interesting to put into the game. Although fun, giving feedback isn't about what you would build while you were working on the game. It's about being the most honest player you can be and letting the developer know what did and did not work for you. Being able to sit down and play other people's tabletop prototypes over the last month has made it very clear to me that just giving what did and did not work for me in the game made it actually better for the developer, especially when I implicitly trusted what their vision was for the game. Having experience in development and playing games myself, I'm sorely tempted to try giving mechanics, aesthetics, or something else to help inspire the developer. This may not be what they're looking for, though. It is best to just give them what you liked and what you didn't like in their game. Why am I hammering on this again and again? Well, it's because you're playtesting the game, not making it. If the developer asks for your help, then sure, give advice on how you would make it. Unsolicited advice only causes the other feedback you've given before, and potentially after, lesser value though. And as a person giving feedback, you should be striving to have your input have meaning. As the old adage goes, ideas are cheap, implementation is hard. You're there to provide another angle on the game and give it that perspective to the developer. Working on any long-term project gives most a case of tunnel vision, and having others come in and look at their work in progress gives them that needed perspective to put the project back on track. Game development is the exact same way. Sometimes you just need to have somebody take a look at it to highlight those areas where you really need to be focusing your efforts. Whew, I could talk about this all day, and sometimes I do, but I think this is enough for a digestible piece for now. As always, if you have a topic you'd like me to talk about or suggestions on how to improve one of these side quests, let me know. You can find me on Twitter as @JCSuron. This has been the Adventure Mechanics Side Quest, and I'm still Chandler. I'll talk to you next time.